Hi, I'm Coach Amber, and welcome to the Revero Success Story Podcast. Today we have a special guest with us, Patrick. Welcome, Patrick.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. So, Patrick, tell us a little bit about what your life, your health was like prior to starting a meat-based diet.
Well, Amber, I guess several years ago, I think I was in fairly robust health, but I had been putting on weight after a motorcycle accident stopped me from doing a lot of running and hashing. I was living in the Philippines, where that's my home. Um, yeah, my health was starting to deteriorate. I remember going to a bar, my favourite bar, one night, and one of my older friends who hashed with me. Hashed is like it's outdoor running, sort of outdoor running, walking. You can travel at your own pace. But he asked me about the wounds on my leg that hadn't been healing. I had these wounds, from serrated grass and from bites and leeches that you pick up on hash runs and sort of thing. And I had wounds on my leg, and they'd been there for maybe a couple of months, and that hadn't been healing. And I'd also noticed that I'd had edema, like fluid retention, so much so that when I pressed on my ankle, like I'd get a divot, and divot wouldn't go away. And my friend asking me about the wounds made me think, yeah, maybe I'm not in as good health, because I could still do things. I could ride my push bike, I could do the hash runs, and they'd go for 7 to 11 kilometres, and I could still do things. But I was very out of breath, and I was going up hills, I was labouring, and I was carrying a lot of extra weight. I was around 145 kilos, which is over 300 pounds, I guess. So I decided to go to a doctor, a local doctor in the Philippines. He's an expat American, and he suggested that I go and get blood tested and do a pre-diabetics check. And it turned out that he did the readings of the blood test. Though I took the blood test home and I looked at the results, and it looked very. I can't remember the high AC or whatever it was, but there were a number of telling markers that suggested that I was pre-diabetic, and he confirmed that diagnosis. And he said, look, without dramatic lifestyle changes, you're going to have to go on to, like I think it was metformin, and maybe headed towards an insulin. Several years prior to that, a doctor had suggested that I might need to use statins, because I'm 67 years of age, and when I was in my 50s, I suggested that I might need to use statins, and I decided to reject that. I don't like doctors. I don't like medical advice that suggests that I become a tool of big pharma. I rejected taking statins, and when he suggested that I might need to go on a lifelong course of pre-diabetic medication, I decided to reject that. I went home and used this internet thing to research as much as I could on health and pre-diabetes. And I was delighted to find a chap called Jason Fung, who I'm sure your listeners know quite a bit about Jason, and a couple of other guys. There's another good old boy from Tennessee, Dr. Ken Berry, I think his name is, Ken Berry. I don't think at that stage I hadn't seen ShawnBaker, but I listened to what those guys had to say, and I was particularly interested in just changing my lifestyle and making the dramatic changes. So I stopped drinking alcohol. Drinking alcohol was a part of life in Southeast Asia. I stopped drinking alcohol and started reducing. I went on a 3-day fast. The fast was fairly difficult because of I was carb loaded. I used to eat a lot of carbs. I live in Asia. Rice with every meal was the way to go. But as I continued doing the research, I decided that I was going to change what I had to eat. And so I decided that I was going to go primarily no carb or low carb, and to this new thing called a keto diet. I went towards a keto diet. Within a few months, it happened so quickly, it was quite remarkable. My daughter joined me on the journey. She was carrying a little bit of, she was only 13 at the time. She was carrying young kid weight. And she joined me on the journey, and we together dropped an enormous amount of weight. I dropped over 40, 45, 50 kilos, which is 100 pounds, which is basically what my daughter weighed. I lost my daughter as a passenger in a way. So that was what inspired me to change. It just required a bit of a change of lifestyle, which I've been able to maintain. I've stayed with, moved slowly towards carnivore from keto because meat tastes good. Meat tastes good, and Australia produces a lot of meat, and I've never, my mouth has never watered over a potato. You know what I mean? It's just never get hungry looking at a carrot, but I see a ribeye steak, and it sort of inspires a little bit more fantasies than do Brussels sprouts. So that's moved me towards carnivore.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so Patrick, when you first transitioned into carnivore, what did you eat? And did you have any transitional issues?
Okay, well, in the Philippines, meat is a bigger problem than you probably imagine. All steaks, decent steaks, good steaks are imported. I mean, the Philippines, they have a national cow. It's called a carabao, and it's a great animal if you want to drag something up the street. But I don't know, the Filipinos don't tend to cut it up and eat it with quite the same relish as we do in Australia. Not carabaos, we have Angus and Herefords and Christ knows what else. So I'd be buying imported steak, and my favourite bar, one of the things that an Australian never does, even though I'd stopped drinking, is give up his bar, because that's where his mates hang out, and that's where conversations with expats takes place. So I continued going to my bar, and they could get steaks, but they're very expensive. You'd be paying $30 US for a steak or whatever. That's for good steak, and it's about 700 grams of good steak, so a good ribeye. So I tended to move towards ribeye, but I was consuming a lot of bone broth, because we get a lot of ox bones and slice them up, leg bones, and make a lot of bone broth, and good steak whenever I could get it. The bar also did a lot of European sausages, which were popular among some people, but I'm not a sausage man. I could eat eggs, but give me a steak. So I was paying a lot of money for steaks. Because my daughter needed to get required citizenship in Australia, we had to return to Australia in 2019. It was just in time, basically, to get locked down. So, we can't get out of Australia, so I'm still in Australia. But in Australia Australia is a beautiful country, and it's a wonderful place. And I know that there's been a lot of talk in the media about how restricted it is here. But basically, it's a great place to be. My daughter loves it, my wife loves it, and I can get steak. So whilst I prefer to go back home to Philippines, I can get steak at a much more reasonable price than what I could in the Philippines. So I'm eating a lot of ribeye, not so much sausage, because I was dismayed when I read on the pack of sausages what else is in a sausage. It's not, if it was just mince, if I can find a butcher, and I have, there's butchers that make their own sausages, and I say, well, what's in that? I want a lot of fat in my sausage, because fat's great, tastes good. And I like to be able to go to the butcher shop and look at the meat and try to get the fattiest cut of meat. So if there's a really big fatty ribeye or a big roll of meat, with a lot of fat on it, I'll buy it. So I'm eating a lot of good meat from good butchers, steering clear of sausages. And I haven't had a carrot in a long time.
I love that. Okay, so did you have any transitional issues? Did you have any problems at all?
No confusion outside toilets for transitional issues, but no, not really. I've always been, I knew what I wanted to do, and it's just, people are different. I can understand some people would want to slide back towards the scones and the cakes and the sweet things, but no, I did notice, of course, you notice a hankering for honey, because I used to keep bees and I used to make honey. So And I've always liked honey, even when I was, extracting honey from the comb. I always liked honey. I could, oftentimes I'd put my dirty finger into the honey. It was, don't worry, honey's antiseptic and it's pure. When I was a kid, I used to eat a lot of honey, and every now and then I do like honey, and I do like bread. And sometimes when there's fresh bread being made in my sister lives in a house nearby, and when I'm there and she's making bread, I still feel the desire to have a piece of bread with a hunk of butter and honey on it. But I pretty well rejected it. Australians love Vegemite as well. You may have heard of Vegemite. And it's unbeatable. I mean, the rest of the world, I don't care if the rest of the world never has any Vegemite. It just leaves more for us. It's fantastic, and it's full of vitamin D and vitamin B and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we used to be told you shouldn't eat so much Vegemite. It's too much salt, or that's crap. Vegemite's great, but what do you put Vegemite on? Well, I started rubbing chickens with Vegemite before I'd cook a chicken. You just rub it all over the carcass and put a chicken into try to get as much Vegemite onto meat. I also rub meat, like on a pork roll. I'll rub it with Vegemite before cooking it. But apart from that, no real transitional issues. Miss bread, miss sugar or honey, but don't really miss cakes and sweet pastries. In the past, a long time ago, I went like vegetarian at some stage after I read Peter Singer's book. What was it called? Animal Liberation, back in the 1970s. That's how far back I go, yeah. And I was affected by the industrialisation of food and decided that I'd give vegetarianism a go because I disagreed with the industrialisation of our food supply. And I went on to just pure food, but it was nuts and berries. I had a lot of almonds and walnuts and a lot of dried fruit. Well, I don't really miss it, but dried fruit, is one of the things that I regret that I don't eat dried fruit anymore, because it's concentrated sugar. After all, that's all dried fruit is. I've got a lemon tree out the back. Occasionally, I'll pick a lemon off it and I'll eat a lemon. I understand with the fibre, you get very little of the carb, and the sugar is limited in a lemon. The only other thing that I might sometimes have a crack at is dill cucumbers. Unsweetened dill cucumbers. They've got a lot of fibre and they give just a different texture. I eat a lot of eggs too. So I'll have steak and eggs, bacon and eggs. People say bacon's got nitrates. Screw that. Bacon's great. Anybody who doesn't eat bacon, good. But I'll eat bacon, eggs, occasional dill cucumber, occasional lemon. My wife has really helped out with this, because unfortunately, before leaving the Philippines, she was diagnosed with having Hashimoto's disorder. And the best cure for Hashimoto's disorder is nutritional. It's a nutritional approach. So she was able pretty much to join me on a keto diet, which serves the Hashimoto's, serves as a great cure for Hashimoto. So she's not pure carnivore or solidly carnivore like myself or my daughter, nor has she gone for the one meal a day type of approach and the long-term fasting. She is a Filipina, and she loves every meal had to be served with rice, but she's given up the rice and she's basically on a more keto diet these days. And I got to tell you, if any of your listeners are Hashimoto sufferers or have thyroid conditions, go keto or go more towards meat diet, carnivore diet, because her Hashimoto's, whilst it's an autoimmune disorder, it doesn't clear up totally, but she's well on top of it. She's back to where she was 10 years ago. Very robust health. She'll finish work, come home, and she'll still say she's tired, but she's in incredible health now. And so is my daughter, and I think so am I.
That's
and you'll
awesome.
probably notice in the background, I still swing kettlebell every morning, and, so no transitional issues. I mean, the kettlebell is certainly not assisted by Brussels sprouts.
I love it. Okay, so the last question is, how has your health improved since starting a meat-based diet? What changes have happened since what you talked about in the beginning?
Well, a few things. I mean, my stamina has increased as my daughter's demands have increased. As she's gotten older, she's doing Duke of Edinburgh, which is like an outdoor campaign sort of thing where she has to do physical activity. And I go along on her physical activities. Just, we walk 5, 6, 7 or 8 kilometres on a weekend. So my health has rebounded to the extent that I don't have to. I'm not as exhausted as I once would have been even on the hashes when I was doing 11 kilometres. I can do that with my daughter. I can ride a push bike a lot further than I used to be able to. I'm not a great swimmer, so I don't go swimming, but I do. Yeah, I swing the kettlebell. My kettlebell activity is back to about where it was when I was running a gym in Malaysia. I was a school teacher and I had a gym. I opened a gym for the kids. I used to swing the kettlebell on a daily basis. Well, I'm back to the same sort of activity I can do with the kettlebell now that I was doing 10 years ago. So my health has rebounded in that regard. And that's not just the kettlebell swing, which I think is the most important or the best of all the kettlebell exercises, is just the swing. Let's see. I walk better. I ride a push bike better. I can swing the kettlebell better. Brain fog. A lot of talk about brain fog. I don't know how you'd measure that. I do a lot of research because I'm an historian, and I do a lot of researching and writing. So I don't do very much socializing. So I don't really socialize and talk to very many people like this, but I'm more eloquent in my writing than I think I was before. And that could be because I'm focusing on it a lot more. But I certainly haven't noticed any deterioration in my ability to put words together since being on a carnivore diet. And there is so much good information. I mean, brilliant information coming across the internet. This, the internet is basically my dream come true when Margaret Thatcher back in 1987 promised that we would one day all have access to the complete contents of the London University Library. I thought, bullshit, but no, we've got it, and we've got access to all the information. So if I want to find out anything about nutrition or health, I watch ShawnBaker's podcast regularly. He's moving more into, he's getting more recognition for his political thinking these days than just his nutritional, because there's only so much you can say about meat. I mean, we can have this conversation. There's only so much you can say about meat. Meat's good, eat more meat. And once you've done that, we've touched the edges of the box. So Shawn's a very believable guy, and he has a lot of followers, and he has a lot to say, and he's a thoughtful bloke. So good on him. Keep it up. Shawn for president, all that. So how has my health rebounded? I think I'm more. It hasn't. The problems with age haven't affected me very much. My strength is there. My stamina is there. I think my intellect is not deteriorating as much as it might otherwise do. Yeah, that's it. I mean, good constitution, I think.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Patrick, and sharing your story.
Well, it's really great that you contacted me. I mean, I never really seek to be in front of a camera. In fact, quite the reverse. But I think that I'm a bit of I have zealot-like characteristics where I know this works. I know that most of our problems with health are nutrition-based, as Shawn would say, or as Ken Berry would say, or even Dr. Fung and have been saying. They're nutrition-based, and we've got to get, as a zealot, I would tell anybody who asks me a question, look, just change. I don't like using the word diet because people all get this, Weight Watchers idea as soon as the word diet is mentioned, and they're just another money-making organisation. It's not about making money. It's just about common sense. Look at what we are eating. Get away from processed foods and ultra-processed foods, and only eat what grandma would recognise as food is a message. And I'm more than happy to support any organisation, yours included, that have that message to get out there.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you coming on. Even though you don't talk to people very often, you did a really good job, Patrick. So I think we're good.
It helps.
Thank you.
The writing helps, I think.
Well,
But thank
thank
you.
you. And you have a wonderful rest of your evening or morning, wherever I think
It's
morning
morning here. If I open that, you'll see the morning in central New South Wales.
now. Thank you,
Okay.
Patrick. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye, Amber. Nice talking with you.
Nice talking with you.
Join Revero.health for a 30-day free trial to get access to live Q&A with VIP guests, social community meetings, member discounts, low-carb healthcare providers list, forum, workouts, monthly challenges, early access to podcasts, recipes, carnivore diet guide, fasting guide, shred guide, and much more.